I didn't even bring my coffee down. This is terrible. So welcome to a live chat. I don't know how's the chat work? Start a Q&A, start a live chat. It's been a long time since I've done a live stream this way. Just using my old phone. This is my one of the projects I've been working on, which is a basement window. And so I framed it out. You can see for the window that's not yet here yet, and that's the old window that used to be here. I don't know if anyone is seeing this. I can't see any comments. I don't think, and it doesn't look like there's any people here, but we'll see how it works. I'll keep it short, I guess. So, well, it says there's two people here, but this isn't true. Oh, Fleabus. I do see comments on the bottom. Okay, this is how it works. You're working. So, I don't know. I might have to go get water. Jess just texted me, "Do you need help troubleshooting?" Kind of, because I don't know what was happening. I checked everything that I know how to work, and I did everything except restart my computer, but I used two different computers. So, um, and I got a notification on the top of StreamYard that said they're having some problems with audio, something. So I think it's maybe a StreamYard problem. You can check it out on your end if you want, Jess. So communication in the telepathy tapes. So I've been listening to the telepathy tapes, which is this podcast series by this woman, lady, Kai, Kai something. Okay, I'm gonna get water and my coffee because this is obnoxious, and I'll come back. You're coming with me. Kai, and it's essentially about um the cliff notes of it is that it's about there's my coffee. It's a little house tour. It's about non-verbal persons. Um, and water. Help nonverbal persons, and so I mean, think a lot of times we think like nonverbal autistic people, but I think it can be a bunch of different people, and they call them spellers because they, at least the ones that we're talking about for our purposes, they can communicate with spelling. And Anthony's watching it. Mark Jackson's here. It's been mostly focused on children and young adults, which is interesting. Yeah. And in episode 4, I think it was Lily, one of the girls that they talked to and interview, and one of their illustrations. Thank you, Lynn. It's finally working. Um, Lynn call or Lynn. No, what was her name? Is her name Lynn? I'm confused now with Lynn. But the girl in episode 4, I think it is Lynn. uh calls it's funny because they call voice users persons that are not spellers, people that use their voice to communicate versus just telepathy. And they also kind of lovingly, or she lovingly called voice users muggles. Yeah. Yeah, SG, the communication, the title was communication. I know. But so that'll actually get to my point. Jeff, you're here too. So I'm pretty confident that everyone here, and oh, and I was trying to riff on PVK's title of his last video, which was stories convey, what was it? Stories, I can't get out of it because this is all my phone. Stories convey information is what he said in some way. And that gets at kind of, I said this in my last live stream, or one of my last live streams, that uh I don't the an accurate Jordan Peterson said this, an accurate postmodern uh, way of understanding narrative, I suppose, is that Jordan Peterson clarified this, and he said that we see postmodernism, some postmodernists, because I mean they're not a monolith, as is no identity marker. Nothing is monolithic, but in that way, or as Father Stephen Freeman once said, no one knows anything in general. You only ever know anything in particular, which is another way to say the radical implications of the incarnation, I think, is that all knowing is personal. And if you've met one person, you've met one person. You can't apply things universally, uh, except perhaps Christ, because Christ, within a Christian Christologic thing, is the identity of identity and non identity. Christ, the eternal Tao, which is the non identity is included in the identity, which is also iconic knowing. Um, And, I don't know, so go back to that postmodernism thing. I wouldn't say that we see through narratives, and this is a disagreement I've been having with Phlebas, who's working. I think we see through narratives, which is the modernist conundrum, which is what a lot of my last stream was about. Um, you, you think you see through your articulable, conscious, self-awareness, left-brained map. But you don't. You don't see through the map. You can use the map to try to interpret reality, but reality is what you see. You see reality. Um, and do you see it perfectly or without delusion? Well, that's that really hard line to discern between, I think, in Owen Barfield's book, Saving the Appearances, which to me is the book about this stuff, how people see. It's about perception. And Barfield has his 3 levels of perception, I think. He has the figurations level, and then he has alpha thinking, and then he has beta thinking. And so the figuration level is, I would equate, this is my understanding of it. If somebody's a better Owen Barfield scholar, they can correct me on this. But the figuration level is what all human beings have. It's what babies have. So Mark Parker, infants, they they see it just a figuration level. It it's where you see unities of multiplicity. It's to see. So like a baby, when they're really little, um, their eyes just kind of are fluid and wander, and they can't focus. Because they can't focus, and the reason they can't focus is because they can't, in a sense, they can't see. This goes back to my very first video. My first video on my channel, I think, was a two-parter, and it was seeing is not seeing. And it's related to like what Jordan Peterson talks about when he talks about most vision, and we know this, I suppose, neurologically, but also through brain science, is that like your ocular, I suppose, your vision stuff, most of it is inhibitory. Most of what vision is, for when we talk about the sense idea of vision, looking with your eyes, most of it is inhibitory because you have to shut out things in order to focus. And you focus here, and then you see your periphery over here, but you can't focus on your periphery because those are different things. The periphery is the space, the context in which your focal vision exists, and your focus is inhibitory because you're shutting everything else out in order to look at whatever you're looking at. But in order to look at whatever you're looking at, you have to see a unity of a multiplicity. You have to see a thing. You cannot see just all the parts of this cup, you see the cup. If you focus on the parts, you're not seeing the cup, you're seeing the part. You're seeing the unity of the part. And Jonathan Peugeot has a great video on how all of those levels are essentially faith. You are seeing the unity of the multiplicity at each one of those levels, and each level up is a jump in faith. And your brain does this so quickly. And then back to Barfield, that's the alpha level above figuration. So the baby in the oceanic oneness essentially isn't perceiving anything, really. They're learning to perceive, they're evolving their ability to perceive. And then all of a sudden, it's like when they first focus and look at you and see you in your eyes, and focus on you and see your face. where you can start playing peekaboo, and the baby sees you. They first see you. They put everything else in the periphery and focus on your face, and they see your face, and you can see them. You can see that happen. You can see them observe you for the first time. That would be more that's the figurations level. This is in my opinion. And then the alpha thinking is word association. And that's correlated with language. And so like you can imagine, you can see a tree before you know the word tree or Spanish, arbol or whatever, but we're all seeing a tree and you have different word associations for that. And as you know multiple languages, all of that becomes a little bit more fluid, I suppose. But you can see a tree before you can name a tree. But then there's this great quote by he's an architect, I believe, Robert Irwin, and I've always loved this quote. But he says, "Seeing is forgetting the name of the thing one sees." And so, to some degree, you could also think of this as like the stepwise learning of anything. I'm thinking of Michael Polanyi, subsidiary focal integration, Esther Meek. They talk about these things, but um, or like learning a martial arts or learning the piano or something, when you're learning the piano or riding a bike, you learn the scales, you learn these stepwise things of how to do things, you integrate that, you build neural networks so you no longer have to focus on it. So then the focal integration, you're focusing on it, you integrate it, and then that integration becomes subsidiary, unconscious, not in your conscious focal awareness. It's just part of your body, you embody it, and then you focus on other things because that's what riding a bike or driving or playing the piano is that when you're playing the piano you're not thinking about the scales, you're not thinking about your fingers, so you've integrated that, which is what enables you to play the piano or ride the bike so you can look down the road or driving a car. And we all experience this. Sometimes you drive a car and you go into autopilot and you're not thinking about what you're doing at all, but you're driving because all of that stuff has been subsidiary integrated from previous focal awareness, and everything's that way. And very often I've heard masters talk about this. Like I think of Tom Cruise, Samurai, that movie Samurai. But when he's learning to be a samurai and fighting, he's thinking about it and he can't ever beat the guy that's teaching him because the other guy's too fast. And he's like, I just can't do it. I'm not fast. And the guy's just like, no mind, no mind. And what he's essentially saying is stop thinking about it. You know all this stuff so much, but in order to become elite, in order to really, in order to know what you don't know, you have to stop thinking about it because it's too slow. You need to just do it. It needs to become. I heard once a long time ago, or maybe no, this was me. I think I said this once to my boy Dan Bittaker, who's a guy I know for Twitter, a long time ago. He's my first online friend. Um, but I described wisdom as spiritual muscle memory, and that's a little bit. That's what that is. It's wisdom. It's things that you know, but you can't even necessarily explain, but you know because it's so integrated that it's part of you. And maybe it's not even something that you integrated stepwise through your own life, but it's been given through many generations within your family or something. And so that's the alpha thinking in Barfield. And then the beta thinking is like meta thinking. It's thinking about thinking, which is meta. Um, okay. So communication, telepathy tapes. So where I want to bring this, and I probably won't keep this that long. I mean, I can look at comments, I guess, and scroll back through comments, but I don't. This isn't as slick as StreamYard for sure. And I feel more alone in this, which is what my boy Jens was telling me about this morning. Live streams are cool because you can bring people in, you can invite them into StreamYard, you can talk to them. Um, yeah, Kezi babble to pure speech. I mean, that's you retracted it. You're maybe correcting it, but yeah, pure speech is the kind of thing that I'm talking at. And this is Phlebas's critique of me is he's like, that's only possible in the eschaton. That's possible when we're perfect. When we know as we are known. But I think we have glimpses of that, and I think we can participate in that now to varying degrees, and I think that's what saints do. That's what any holy persons from any religious tradition do. People that love appropriately, they know as they are known. Their knowledge isn't mechanistic, transactional, mammon, babble type things. It's not. So this is where I want to go with the telepathy tapes. Okay, so there are these people, these autistes, maybe these autistic people, the spellers who can communicate without, in a sense, mind to mind. And that would be, and they're talking about this right now. I believe I'm in episode 8, and they're talking about this a little bit in that it's really frustrating for these people who purport, I mean, let's just, they profess to be able to do this. It's really frustrating for them, and they almost don't prefer to use language because they find it to be clunky. Huh. Um, because it's as if telepathically when they're communicating mind to mind, there is no interpretive lack. There is no interpretive delay. It's just it's almost imagistic to imagistic thing. And one of the moms in she came in episode 4 and they talked about her a few times. I forget her name right now. She was talking about how and this is something Rogan has talked about. It's like, where do ideas come from? Or in one of my favorite YouTube clips, Cormac McCarthy, it's on my channel. It's entitled, or it's in my clips on my channel. It's called like what is the name of it? But it's essentially on the unconscious. It's like from this interview of his, which is phenomenal. It's on the unconscious. And he says all of us have this experience where when we're talking and we're trying to communicate something, we say, um, and when you're searching for words, right, you say, okay, how to say it. So he's like, we all know we have a thing in our mind that we want to say, but it's pre-verbal or it's transverbal. It's inside and outside of language. It can be it can be It can be attempted to communicate it in language, but it is something that's bigger than language, and we always feel Jess, my boy Jess has this great on Twitter, he had this meme, which was just like my idea before I try to speak it, and it's this big, beautiful, multicolored thing, and he's like, when I try to speak it, and it's this tiny little thing that's just like a small fraction of what the big thing was. And that is how words the right words, I think, can point to this higher meaning, but this is why we have the meaning crisis, is because words convey in the especially in the modernist frame, I would say in the modernist consciousness, words convey information, they do not convey meaning. And meaning is always personal. This is why I say meaning is the nexus and the locus of all meaning. And if you don't this th meaning is fundamentally personal. It has to be. And Malcolm Guite, I want to quote this from his he had a lecture on George MacDonald's The Imagination, and he said this in here riffing. I think it's a MacDonald quote. Um, but in it, it's one of my favorites. I have it as well, like one of my videos to remember, I think on my channel. But if you just type in like Malcolm Guite, George MacDonald Imagination or something, it'll come up. It's a few months old now, but he said, "Words do not so much convey meaning as they awaken meaning." That is right. Like, that is just I don't know, I feel like that is one of those quotes where I feel like, um, Will Hunting in Good Will Hunting, when he's in the last scene, when he burns that paper, when he does the proof on it, and the professor is just like, "Have you thought about this?" Or, "Have you thought about this mathematical theorem or proof or whatever?" And he's like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." He's just like, "What? It's right." He's like, "Just take it home. Trust me, it's right." That that George MacDonald, Malcolm Guite quote is right. And I would just say, like, take it home. Think about it. It's just correct. Words do not convey meaning, they awaken meaning. And why do they awaken meaning versus convey meaning? Is because meaning isn't transactional. It cannot be. It is personal, and it can only be awakened because meaning is receive with meekness the implanted word which is able to save your souls. Meaningfulness. It comes out of the divine spark, the implanted seed, the implanted logos, the image of God. All meaning is God stuff, and it can only be awakened. It can never be coerced or transacted or forced upon someone else. You cannot ever tell anyone what to think or what something means. You can test, you can give witness. David Dark has this great quote that like the call of the Christian, or I would say the good person, the true person, is to bear witness to the witness you perceive. That's all you can do. You can't tell anybody what to think. You can't tell anybody what anything means. That's the authoritarian. The authoritarian tries to do that. You just can't do it. It's personal, but it's also relational. Emil says it's personal, but it's also relational. My definition of a person, I have a video on the divine person versus the isolated autonomous individual. And my friend Rod sent me a video recently of Benjamin Boyce talking to Vervaeke, and Vervaeke like almost exactly used my word, but he talked about the autonomous individual. I just threw another word on that when I talked about the divine person versus the isolated autonomous individual. The individual is not the person. The person is a relation. It's a it's that's what a person is. A person isn't isolated. A person is necessarily relational. Um, and so when I say you're awakening a meaning, it's not like some individual solipsistic thing. It's going to be fundamentally connected to all of your relations. Um, but it's going to be completely unique to you. Okay, so telepathy. The other thing I want to say about the telepathy thing is I was thinking, um, my Sam Tiedemann was really trying to get me to think about these things and talk about them, and I replied on Twitter to Kale Zeldin because Kale Zeldin's been fired up about these, and he's like, "Why is TLC not talking about these?" And I mean, in episodes like 4, 5, and 6, well, 4 on, they start bringing in Rupert Sheldrake, and I'm like, "Yeah, Sheldrake." I don't know. I've been talking about Sheldrake since the beginning of the corner. He's on Sheldrake. I would put for sure on my Mount Rushmore of the meaning crisis, the intimacy crisis, uh, like who I would consider to be TLC, super important, essential figures to look at. And I mean, who would it be? Sheldrake, McLuhan, Barfield. I don't know who else I put in there. They are the great seminal thinkers that I think are behind many of the more popular thinkers. Like even C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis is great. Most of what I think is really great in C.S. Lewis and Tolkien, the most of the philosophical stuff that I think is really great is Barfield. I think they got most of that from Barfield. Um, so they're talking about Sheldrake on there, and a lot of his studies on telepathy and dogs who know when their owners are coming home, and I don't know that they've talked about, maybe they did talk about his phone telepathy study that he did. But these are all interesting. But what I would argue is these telepathy tapes are only profound to you if you're a physicalist, if you're a materialist, if you believe that communication is magical, mystical, sacramental, and that communication really has to do with communion and dialogos. It's not that profound because I would say like um, and we all know this. You can actually, even with language, you can't. There's miscommunication, there's discommunication, there's misinformation, there's disinformation, there's malformation, malinformation. There's language and words and propositions do not communicate one they do not convey one-to-one meaning or information, I would argue. This is this is where this is why we have um this institutional failure that's going on, and why so many people are scrambling on what is meaning? How do I know meaning? If if you're worried about the fall of institutions and meaning and what things mean and what's going on, Eh, it's because you've never understood what communication and meaning is to begin with. Like the failure of institutions to be able to convey meaning. If you thought you understood, if anyone thinks he knows, he does not yet know as he ought to know. This is 1 Corinthians 8. This is the knowing as you are known. Knowledge will pass away. If you think knowledge and information are meaning, you don't get it. Um, Meaning can only be awakened. And so, like, you can talk to we all have this experience a lot. I have this experience a lot where, like, how many people tell me this? Like, Paul's here now. David Busatil has told me this. Paul has told me this. Many people have told me this. Jacob just explicitly and not in a very winsome way tells me, like, I don't know what I'm talking about because Jacob listens to me and he hears absolute nonsense. David Busatil is like, my this part of this because I can't bring anyone else in to bounce off of and talk and communicate with or attempt to communicate with is just going to be me talking monologuing and people are just going to be like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Well, and this is why I've told Paul many times, like, he uses the illustration of Jonathan Peugeot, like 3 years ago or 4 years ago or whatever, and he's like, nobody understood what Jonathan Peugeot was talking about. But then in participating procedurally, running in circles is remember embody. We're in the age of decay. It's the Chad song. Chad, I'm singing your song. SG, I can't bring you in. I can't bring anyone in. I can't. I'm on YouTube. I'm not on StreamYard. Um, and this is not going to Grail Country. This is exclusive Luke Thompson content. Um, you you start to understand Jonathan Peugeot. Why? Why do you begin to understand Jonathan Peugeot when you couldn't before? I can't give a link, Sam. I'm on YouTube. I'm not on StreamYard. Uh, you can't you start to understand Jonathan Peugeot because you begin to love him, because you start to give him your attention. You start to pay attention to him. Jordan Peterson, pay attention to what you pay attention to. And in your participation, your procedural participation of Peugeot's propositions, what's the other one? Procedural, participatory, propositional, uh, what are they? Procedural, propositional, participatory, the 4 Ps of knowing. Don't tell me, this is obnoxious. Procedural, propositional, participatory. Perspectival. Got it. Per Your perspectival stuff will start to shift, and then I think you will have personal knowing, which is that great, super great Viktor Frankl quote, which is just like, "You can't understand anyone unless you love them. You won't understand them." Because love is the medium of communication, of true communication. That is knowing as you are known. That is love. You will not understand someone if you don't love them. You can't. You just it's because it's not a transaction. It requires God. If you're trying to understand them without love, 1 Corinthians 13, you will be doing mammon, not God. And if you love them, you will be participating in God and you'll understand. Um And so I would argue that people start to understand Jonathan Peugeot because they participate with him. They really give him attention. They try to understand him. They think there's something there to understand. Here we go. Imagination. So this is where I want to get with imagination. This applies to the streams we've been having lately and all the people I've been talking about. So like T-Grok, my boy T-Grok, I'm just using you as an illustration. I'm not letting it take over the stream, but he said, "How do you know the difference between imagination and reality?" And I said, "I don't. They are the same thing. Imagination is reality. I think we are participating in the imagination of God in as much as we are participating in reality, which is what lends toward life versus death. If you stop participating in reality, you die. If you participate in reality, you live. And that is attunement to what is, which I would say is God. In him we live and move and have our being. The imagination of God, Christ. We are God's becoming. Uh, George MacDonald. And forgiveness is being, I would argue, to quote the world's best. I was going to clip it from my last stream. TLC's best theologian, which is Jason Almontree, and forgiveness. That is what it means to be one with God. Is to forgive. God forgive them. They know. Father forgive them. They know not what they do. And I think all sin comes from ignorance. Ignorance of what both voluntary and involuntary ignorance. Um, and so, dude, I can't put you I'm not putting you on any pedestal. I'm just saying what is, Jason. Not me. But that's why you need to be on the pedestal because you're humble. You're just saying what you see. It's all fine. Um, okay, so imagination. What I think T-Grog was saying to riff on Alex O'Connor talking about Ben Shapiroing someone, like Kathy Newmaning someone, which again is mammoth because you're just trying to own them. You're not listening to them. You're paying attention to the question, not the questioner. When you pay attention to the question, not the questioner, you're mammoning, not personaling. If you pay attention to the questioner, then you may be able to understand the question. But if you try to understand the question without the questioner, you are in the world of language and words conveying information in a one-to-one way rather than love, which will never allow you to understand. It does not work. And so, fractal trinity shirt, Sam. So you imagination. I said once, and I think this is true. If you can't imagine how someone else is seeing something you're not seeing or saying something that's right, you'll never be able to see it if you can't imagine it. Because imagination is even what allows science to work because if you don't know how to apply some scientific fact or proposition or truth and how to run experiments and you can't imagine it, you can't do anything. Imagination is what enables you to act in the world and act as if belief is the belief. It's what you do. It's not what you merely think, it's what you do. And so that's the difference between propositional tyranny and belief as the full embodiment of your life, your fruit, the fruit of your life. Um, so if I speak in the tongues of men and of angels but have not love, I am nothing. Um, so imagination is necessary for understanding within any paradigm, within any ideology. And this is why any ideology is a closed system. It's the Ouroboros, whether it's religious, whether it's scientific, whether it's any confessional bounded thing that can't open up to what it doesn't know in the imagination, the left brain is the master and the right brain is non-existent because you can't see it. So it doesn't exist. So I I just don't whether you're communicating telepathically with someone or whether you are communicating with language, whether you are a voice user to wrap this up to do the telepathy tapes, and I'm going to move on. Um, it's all love. The thing behind the thing behind the thing, Kale, because I said that you want to talk about the thing behind the thing behind the thing of all communication is love, whether it's telepathic or whether it's trying to use language. Um, but if you are using language to try to impose or coerce or change or manipulate or you are not meaning can only be awakened. It cannot be conveyed. I guess that's what I would leave you with. And sorry, I guess the only way we're gonna really be able to engage is in the comments because StreamYard wasn't working. So my hair, it's just bedhead, TBK. All right, I can go back through the comments a little bit. Nico, yeah, he says, yeah, I don't know. Hezi says we've forgotten how to imagine. Yeah, forgetting. This all has to do with memory and forgetting too. And like Socrates lamented the written word, it will make us forget, and the medium is the message. And this is why the written word has become uh, a monarchical Ouroboros closed in thing because we forgot. We don't know what words we've forgotten that words do not convey meaning. They awaken meaning. And we forgot that because it's become despirited breath, because we've divorced words from the speaker. We're paying attention to the words, the question, rather than the questioner. Alex O'Connor knows these things, I would argue. He just doesn't know that he knows. Luke's propositions are non propositional. Yeah. What else we got? Luke talking to us without StreamYard sort of makes him a cam girl. Gosh. But I plan on having more conversations with this. Yeah, somebody could open up a stream. StreamYard wasn't working for me. If you can get it to work, good for you. Okay, I'm gonna shut it down. Sorry, Sam, to be a tease. Other people, this wasn't my intention. I'm gonna shut it down. Uh, sorry. End stream. And